Watch original photos and videos related to this news by clicking on the link given in the description below the article courtesy. Please subscribe our YouTube channel Listen News here. If you like the video, please like, comment and share the video. At the first Academy Awards, in 1929, there were two top prizes. The award for Outstanding Picture went to Wings, William Wellman's dazzling airborne First World War epic, while the prize for Unique and Artistic Picture went to Sunrise, A Song of Two Humans, a warped domestic thriller from the German Expressionist director F.W. Murnau. 91 years later, the Oscars still echo the same tensions, between the spectacular and the intimate, between roaring technical achievements and quieter innovations in style. This year's front-runners for Best Picture, after all, are a technologically ambitious First World War epic, 1917, and a warped domestic thriller by a foreign director, Parasite. The Academy, meanwhile, is still navigating its place in Hollywood's perennial tug-of-war between art and commerce. Witness the plan, announced in 2018 and quickly rescinded, to introduce a category for Best Popular Film. That came 8 years after the Academy expanded the number of Best Picture nominations from 5 to as many as 10, in response to The Dark Knight failing to get a nod. Now, in a promise self-fulfilled, a billion-dollar blockbuster from the Batman franchise has made the list, in the grimacing form of Joker. But will that make the Oscars any more relevant than, say, 2017, when Moonlight, after some confusion, snatched victory from the jaws of La La Land? And what will it portend for the industry if Netflix, represented by The Irishman and Marriage Story, finally manages to win the grand prize, after it came so close last year, with Roma? If there's a theme running through this year's 9 nominees, it may be the past, how it recurs and refracts and never stays still. The Irishman glances back with ambivalence at the swinging heyday of hitmen and Motown, once upon a time, in Hollywood, at the queasy summer of 1969. Little Women spikes a 19th-century novel with 21st-century defiance. Joker gives us a Gotham City straight out of the grimy Ed Koch era. 1917 eyes the First World War battlefield from a new angle, just over the shoulder, while Jojo Rabbit blows a raspberry at Nazis. Even Marriage Story is haunted by the marriage in its title, which precedes the events of the film. And then there's Ford v Ferrari, a back issue of Esquire turned sentient. Only Parasite seems free of nostalgia, tarnished or otherwise. It's too rabid with hunger to look back. Who will win? Let's take one last peek at the contenders. The Irishman. It's a testament to the twists and turns of Oscar season that The Irishman isn't this year's incontestable front-runner. A 3.5-hour Martin Scorsese epic that brings together Robert De Niro, Al Pacino, and Joe Pesci for one more joyride through the land of guns and golden oldies. A reported $160 million budget, which paid for state-of-the-art effects that rewound the clock on some of the most famous faces in cinema. It seemed like the grand gesture that would clear the field for Netflix, which picked up the project after Paramount declined to foot the bill. And yet, after the film won honors in early December from the National Board of Review and the New York Film Critics Circle, its awards momentum slowed. Go figure. The Irishman has the melancholy soul of an old man who's seen his world come and go, but it moves and gleams like a vintage Chevrolet. Speaking of cars. Ford v Ferrari. Vroom. Vroom. Hoo booey. Did you see how fast the cars move in this thing? Ha ha ha. Vroom. Jojo Rabbit. Months after its release, the concept still stuns. A cute little tyke, who happens to be in the Hitler Youth, dreams up the Führer as an imaginary friend. Taika Waititi not only wrote and directed this stone-faced satire, he also played the child's eye Hitler, in the antic tradition of Drop Dead Fred. Opinions differed as to whether the film's zany take on Nazism really lands in an age when far-right extremism is making a global comeback, but it's hard to see how anyone could get the wrong message. Indoctrination is insidious, and we're all susceptible to brainwashing, and capable of deprogramming. Jojo Rabbit is a tricky proposition, and kudos to Waititi for daring to put it on screen. If you prefer parables that beat you bloody with the obvious, however, look no further than Joker. Todd Phillips's movie managed to win the Golden Lion Award at the Venice International Film Festival, make $1 billion, turn a grotty staircase in the Bronx into a tourist attraction, and rack up 11 Oscar nominations, the most of any film this year. So why does its ascendance feel like a hostile takeover? When it opened, some feared it would inspire mass violence. Instead, it just seems like a sour time capsule. In the year 2019, an origin story about a homicidal clown really got us. Still, it would be wrong to call Joker a Trumpian fantasy of white male grievance. If anything, its politics resemble old-fashioned bleeding heart liberalism. Every down-and-out murderer is the product of neglectful parents, a fraying social safety net, poor health care, and income inequality. If Ronald Reagan were alive, he'd run against it. Little Women. Greta Gerwig, the mumblecore starlet turned a list director, gave Hollywood its fourth major adaptation of the Louisa May Alcott novel in the last century, which is still less Batman than we've had since 2008. Since its release, its admirers have worried that men, including men who vote for awards, have been giving the movie a pass. Gerwig's absence from the Academy's Best Director list appeared to back up that unsettling theory. Nevertheless, the movie is arriving at Oscar weekend with $100 million in domestic grosses, meaning that plenty of women and men knew where to find it. Gerwig's take on Alcott felt fresh and timely and not the least bit redundant, an adaptation that slyly interrogated the act of adaptation. Little Women has a good chance of winning a screenplay award for Gerwig, but it is an underdog in the Best Picture race, where it stands alone as a female-driven film. Marriage Story. Oh, and look, Gerwig's boyfriend has a movie, too. I first saw Noah Baumbach's Marriage Story in an empty screening room, on my way to meet Adam Driver, and its raik was impossible to shake off. But so was its humor, which, in true Baumbach fashion, is inextricable from its pain. The machinery of divorce is just that awful and absurd. In some sense, Marriage Story feels like a throwback to the kind of chamber family dramas Hollywood made 4 decades ago, when Kramer vs. Kramer, 1979, was both the biggest domestic moneymaker of that year and the Best Picture winner. The only film that has achieved that since is Titanic. Like Kramer, Marriage Story reveals how divorce brings out the ugliest in people who once loved each other, and on some level still do, even as they strive to become functioning co-parents. Laura Dern, as a power-suited divorce lawyer, is all but certain to win Best Supporting Actress. But the breadth of talents that Baumbach corralled shouldn't be overlooked, including his own. It's his best film since The Squid and the Whale, another quasi-autobiographical tale of love lost and family divided. 1917. Sam Mendes's film cannonballed into awards season late in the game, opening on Christmas Day and winning the top prizes at the Golden Globes, the BAFTAs, the DGAs, and the PGAs. Many of those voting bodies overlap with the Academy, and the PGAs, from the Producers Guild, are especially predictive of Best Picture winners. Was this the revenge of the Grandpa movie? If so, didn't Grandpas have The Irishman to keep them warm? Timing may have helped. By Christmas, The Irishman had been on Netflix for nearly a month, and people may have wanted something new to talk about. But 1917 also put a new spin on one of Hollywood's holiest genres, the war epic, which has spanned Best Picture winners including All Quiet on the Western Front 1930, The Bridge on the River Kwai 1957, Patton 1970, The Deer Hunter 1978, Platoon 1986, and The Hurt Locker 2009, plus Saving Private Ryan 1998, which might have won too, if it wasn't for Harvey Weinstein and his Shakespeare in Love voodoo. Hollywood seems to believe that staging a war is among the hardest things it can do, and Mendes made it look even harder, literally shifting the viewer's perspective while affirming old-fashioned movie-making values, and making hundreds of millions of dollars for Universal. Once Upon a Time, in Hollywood. As with all Quentin Tarantino movies, certain images stick in the brain. Brad Pitt cruising in a Cadillac Coupe de Ville, again with the cars, Margot Robbie's Sharon Tate sinking into a movie theater seat, the 11th hour hailstorm of fire and blood. but, at its heart, Tarantino's film is about the peculiar bromance between a petulant second-rate actor and his ultra-suave stunt double. Both men are getting squeezed out of a Hollywood that no longer needs square-jawed pretty boys as it embraces the likes of Roman Polanski and Bruce Lee. And yet these two near-nobodies, Rick Dalton, Leonardo DiCaprio, and Cliff Booth Pitt, saved the day on August 8, 1969, or they might have, had they existed. What a strange little fantasy, irresistible as that Cadillac. The film won a Critics' Choice Award and the Golden Globe for Best Musical or Comedy, though it doesn't fit either genre. Its Oscar chances, though, have coalesced around Best Supporting Actor for Pitt and possibly Best Original Screenplay, an award that Tarantino has won twice already. Parasite. Speaking of original, who would have thought that a comedic thriller satirizing the South Korean class divide would so beguile the movie-going world? Bong Joon-ho's film is difficult to categorize, but it turns out that "awards darling" is one way to describe it. In January, it won the top prize at the Screen Actors Guild Awards, for Best Cast, despite the fact that none of its actors were nominated individually. Since actors make up the largest branch of the Academy, the prize put some wind in the movie's sails as it headed toward the Oscars. An underlooked aspect of the Academy's efforts to diversify its membership has been a far more international reach, and a win for Parasite would signify a shift in what an Oscar movie looks and talks like in the new decade, much in the way that Slumdog Millionaire ushered in the Obama era. Parasite has a less joyful view of globalization and the way it can scramble the social order. Its heroes are members of the waterlogged underclass, whose methods of survival are nutty, inventive, and terrifying, just like the movie. Bottom line, prognosticators have, at various points, pegged this year's race as a 9-film free-for-all, a 5-film brawl among the movies with nominated directors, and a 2-film duel between 1917 and Parasite. Add in the funny math of the preferential ballot, which gives a boost to the second choices of the least popular nominees, and the race seems nearly as tangled as the Iowa caucuses. Months ago, it appeared to be a contest between The Irishman and Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, but a win for either would now be a pleasant surprise. 1917 has emerged as a consensus choice by which the industry could prove that it still makes sweeping, important, technically innovative dramas, distributed by studios that existed a century ago. Viewers are hardly as invested in that narrative as Academy voters, and a 1917 win would be worthy but a bit unremarkable. A Parasite victory, however, would be a welcome shock to the system. And, if the last word you hear read from an envelope on Sunday night is Joker, well, the joke's on us.